Hi everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Track Sports Business Unfiltered, where we explore the careers, systems, and ideas that exist beyond the playing field. So far, we have talked about leagues, partnerships, law, technology, inclusion, and leadership in sport. Today, we are focusing on something that is just as important: the people and operations that make sporting events actually happen on the ground. From global tournaments like Wimbledon and the WTA to grassroots programs, venues, hospitality, logistics, none of the sport would function without strong event execution and operation teams. So today I am excited to welcome Mrs. Shirin Kaur. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing well as well. Thank you for asking. So, Sering has worked across a wide range of roles in the sports industry. That is from player operations at Wimbledon, anti doping chaperoning for WTA tournaments, and managing venues and hospitality at major youth sports competitions, to working on IPL operations and grassroots sports programs in India. She's also a sports content contributor who analyzes tennis and shares insights about the game. So, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Anna, for inviting me. I'm very excited to hear your side and add to my bits and to yours, how you can progress further.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. So, starting off with the first question, your resume is a masterclass in operations with logistics, hospitality, player ops, manpower. And for a student hearing that term, it might sound vague. So can you break it down and can you explain what does a day in the life actually look like for you? And why is this function the absolute backbone of the sports business?
It is so because or talking on like everyday basis. So when you start your day at work, you are not just a person who is into one kind of operation. Let's say if you are into kind of production as in the things that you get made physically, the tens, the octanoms and stuff. So if you are into production, you are not only into production. You have to, join hands with a lot of other people who are actually working on the same project with you, but in a different phase. For example, if there's a person who is into production and getting an octanom made, but the octanom is for, let's say, a vendor, then you have to talk to the person who is managing the vendors, because you want to know that what kind of picture they want in this stall, or what kind of tables do they want, and so on. So you have to be very first of all, you have to be very dynamic. You
Mhm.
have to adapt easily, because if you stick to one thing and you are not flexible, it's not really feasible to work for anyone. You have to be very pliant in your approach, and it's changing day to day. You can say sometimes it changes on very fast paced basis also in an environment, because the requirements can change, and
Mhm.
accordingly you have to hop on. So every day when you start your day, you have to take your notice of the work, whatever you have to achieve as a target for the day. But taking in account the accountability you have to join hands with other people, and you have to see that not just the side of your work should be done, but if your work affects the other person's work, you have to be uh, enough considerate so that even their work is secure. So hospitality or manpower, logistics is all holistically involved in this thing, so that you can easily complete at par. And if I would say that like you asked me, how can I break it down for somebody, it's like when you are at home, you see your parents controlling the entire house. It's not the sense that one of your parent is involved in one of the things. Both of them join hands, and then it is possible to make a household work. It's just like that, because
Yeah.
one of the other things is going to affect you, or your work is going to affect them, and so on. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. So what I understand that it's all about problem solving and as you mentioned that you need to adapt and change as per the requirements as well. So I think that it's not as easy as it might sound or look.
Yeah. It sounds very fancy and exciting,
Mm,
but I won't say it is not exciting. It is very exciting, but you learn a lot when you go and hit the ground. So
yeah,
you have to put your foot in a lot of places at the same time.
yeah, I agree. So then, what's the biggest difference between managing operations for a one-day event versus a two-week tournament like the Wimbledon?
Right. So, if I compare a tournament like Wimbledon, which is actually the world sees it as 2 weeks tournament, but it's actually a 3 weeks tournament because
Mm,
before the main draw starts, we do have the qualifying as well, and before the qualifying starts, we have to prepare the ground as well. So, in an event which is just for one day, it is more chaotic than a long one because you have to do the opening ceremonies and closing also on the day itself. You have to start from scratch and finish, and because of that, the number of people that come in is always bigger than those who are going to come in a big event. So
oh,
you need more people who can actually take care of the entire common people coming in, or let's say the footfall that has to be managed has to be securely managed on a large scale on a one day event. And of course, then you need more security as well because more people, more problems, and more problem solving, and so on. And that's why I'm saying that chaos is kind of magnified and enlarged on a one day event,
yeah.
and it is very fast paced compared to the other ones. If I talk about an event like Wimbledon or IPL, which is very long, like maybe 3 weeks or 3 months long, the things can get chaotic there as well. But we do not have matches every day at IPL, right?
Yeah.
Let's say you are in a city that hosts IPL. Let's say you're in Delhi.
Mm,
So the team, representing Delhi is not going to play in Delhi all the time because whoever their opponent is, they will also host them. So you have time, you have some breathing space to, magnify and see what we have done wrong in the previous match or previous day and correct it by the time the next match arrives. But on one day when you do not have that space at all, so you have to be very quick. You have to be very dynamic, extra dynamic on that note.
yeah. Yeah.
That's a major difference.
Yeah, it's crazy to see how fast-paced everything is. So, yeah, it's really nice how you guys managed to do it in such a short amount of time. Uh,
Yeah, because we do not have to let the people know that there is some change or the other so that their
Mhm.
experience doesn't get halted.
Yeah, so that it can be smooth for them as well.
Yeah, you have to ensure smooth functioning for it.
Yeah. All right, now moving on to the next question. You've managed the pinnacle of pro tennis at Wimbledon and also worked on the grassroots youth sports program. On the surface, they seem like worlds apart, but what are the biggest differences in running them, and what's a surprising similarity in the skills or challenges you face at both levels?
Right. So, by my experience, I would say I've worked on the grassroots in India, and I have worked on the bigger scales, as in international, national scales in India and Europe both. So I
Yeah.
can speak about my experience that when you're working in a place like India, which is huge in population, you
Mhm.
cannot expect everybody to be organized,
Yeah.
right? There's because there's a bigger number of people coming in, there's higher footfall than the people who would arrive at a certain venue that doesn't have equal number of population, right?
Mhm.
So you have to manage that. And apart from that, I would say that when the grassroots things happen, you actually tend to different age groups at the same time.
Yeah.
So when I was working in one of my grassroots projects in football, I had to come across kids who were age 10 or 12 or 15 or 18 or 21. I mean, students from college and school both. So you have to actually, devise a strategy, mental strategy that how are you going to approach them? How are you going to talk to them about anything and
Yeah.
everything? Because if there's a player who is in college, let's say, and let's say the he or she is a football player and they've forgotten to bring their shin guards, they
Yeah.
might not panic. they might just go to their coach, or they might approach one of us and say that, can I please have a pair, if a spare pair if you have. But if the same thing happens to a child who is just 10 years old, they might start crying. They
Yeah.
might be, helpless. They
Yeah.
might feel that maybe my coach will not let me play, or maybe the organizers would say that you have been debarred from playing today, and so on. So you
Mm.
have to see how do you approach them. That's where this process is about psychology as well, how you
Yeah.
approach everybody. And if you see a child who is already, having a meltdown because they have lost something, or they have missed a part of their kit today or whatever, you have to approach them in a way so that they are all right with it. Let's say they have missed their pair of gloves. Let's say a goalkeeper misses it. I'll help them with the gloves, but then I have to make sure that player, whoever that is, a girl or a guy, is giving their 100% when they actually go out to play the match.
Yeah.
So we have to ensure that as well. So
Mhm.
that is what we come across. And while I have been on the professional levels of the game, not in the grassroots, there's a lot more organized stuff over there because they're professional players and they know how to conduct themselves better. How can they actually check for their own supplies? They do have coaches. They always have backups because when I was at Wimbledon, it's a compulsory rule that every player has to wear white. So if a player did not have a white skirt or a shorts to wear, the staff always had spares to give them out.
Oh, yeah.
If the player or the coach did not have, or there are so many number of reasons that your white dress might go, soiled or whatever, it's dirty. There can be any reason, or maybe you have not received your laundry from the last day.
Mm.
So we have to actually prepare backups as well because players are prepared themselves, but we also tend to have their back in
Back.
such matters. So that's the a huge difference that you come across different kind of people, different age groups, and you have to apply a different kind of psychology. And as you pace up and as you go up the game, I mean the work environment, you learn more how to tackle different kind of people.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really interesting on how you like manage when these chaoses come in. And it's also nice that you guys have backups in huge tournaments, which,
Yeah,
yeah, you need, I guess. But yeah.
yeah, of course.
Mm-hmm. And now moving on to the third question. So, like you mentioned right now, in events, sometimes things go wrong. So then when in live events something goes wrong, like weather, delays, shortages, what happens? Can you walk us through a specific high pressure moment where something has failed, or what was the problem and how was it? Like, what was the initial panic and what solution
Uh,
did your team create?
right. So what happens is that no matter the event is big or small, there always are backups.
Mm.
So what happened once I was in this event where I was at the registration desk, and we had two different teams coming to play a football match. So we did have orange colored bibs for one team,
Mhm.
and we wanted to give white color bibs to the other team. But the problem was that the goalkeeper, the goalkeeper's bib did not fit him,
Oh.
and we did not have any other size to give him in the same colored bib.
Mhm.
So we eventually had to call for backup from the venue, which was just a mile across. And we had to get the bibs which were different colored, not orange though.
Oh.
So that's how, you have to join forces with your own team so that you become each other's backup, you have each other's back. So
Mhm.
this is something that happened on a very small grassroots level game. But I've seen things going wrong in a game of Wimbledon as well. Because London is a place which can have rain at any time. It
Yeah.
is, UK is very famous for having the rainfall at any time. And during the time of Wimbledon every year, London is badly prone to it. It
Mhm.
can rain anytime. So whenever it rains, you have to literally vacate the entire crew and the players off the court within a minute because they have to save the grass from getting drenched.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
in that 1 minute, you have to take off the players, their chairs, the chair umpire, his or her chair, the net, and then you have to cover the ground as well. So
Mm.
it is always very panicky over there because the moment the grass gets drenched, thousands of pounds go down the drain.
Yeah.
So that is something that always gets panicky, but there always are backup. And
Mm.
for one code, there are five people. Usually three people to cover up, but we always have more than three, so that, even if the code which is opposite to mine, if they have some trouble, they do not have one person, I can leave my place because it has already got secure number of people and I can go and help them.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. That sounds really stressful with the rain, and also in a matter of time, a lot of money can be just drained. So, yeah, that's really stressful. And many of your earlier roles were in very specific areas like registration or player services. How crucial were those entry level and sometimes gritty jobs to building the career you have now? And what did you learn in those roles that you still use today?
Okay, so in my early roles, I would say I came across a lot of different kind of roles, like you mentioned, but there was a lot of learning to do because we were not given the roles that we had to head upon, or we were the only person accountable. We had to assist someone who was doing some work. I think the first work I did as someone who was not assisting someone was to be a help desk coordinator for this marathon called Pinkathon that takes place in Mumbai every year for 2 days. So I remember my lead gave me just one instruction that there are 10 options, one of them will work. And if none of them works, only then call me. So using this one sentence that my lead gave me, I had to work for 2 days and I had to, I think, entertain about 1,000 people in 2 days because it is, of course, it's a help desk. A lot of people would come and ask, and it was a weekend, so you could expect a huge footfall. So in those matters, you learn a lot, because even if, let's say, if a person is an introvert and they're given such a job, they cannot say, I'm an introvert, I can't talk to the person who's coming to take their ticket number or the bib number. You have to speak to them. So what happens is, in such situations, that you have to, promulgate an environment that everybody seems to adapt to, or they are viable to it. And you have to see that you adapt to the changes coming every now and then.
Yeah.
So once you start speaking to someone, you will actually get to know more. There's more vocabulary, there are more terminologies, there's different scenarios that you see. There are different. I remember I was in this football project, and my lead gave me a case study one day that the sitting what happens if we have the registration on part A and something happens in part B and they're interrelated. What would you do? And I gave her a solution that maybe this would be the solution, but let's see what happens. And very coincidentally, 2 days later, the same thing happened. And I
Oh.
was already prepared because I had discussed it with my lead like 2 days before. So that's how you keep learning. And
Yeah.
if you get an opportunity to repeat the project, it's a huge plus because I did a project as an intern for 1 year. But the next day, the company absorbed me as an employee. And I actually got to know there was so much more that I was not able to see because I was just an intern. So
Mm-hmm.
earlier I was just, on the registration, I was handling it, I was training people. But the next year I became the city lead for registration. And I could see this so much more apart from just writing on the paper
Yeah.
on the. So
Mm-hmm.
that's how, you pick up things. And you think you learn in one event can obviously use in the other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing that you learn about a sport, let's say there's a rule, because there's this one thing I have seen a lot of people don't know is that the offside rule in football, people do not know about it.
Oh.
I've heard like 10 versions of it, but
Mm.
eventually there was this one person who helped me that drew something and told me, see, this is the player, this is the line, this is the ball, how it comes, this is not supposed to come, and that's how you do not consider it a goal. And it was such a simple thing, but people around you create a verbose environment, you cannot understand it. It's
Yeah.
so vague sometimes. So you have to, sieve it through for your own self, for your own peaceful learning, and take it forward. And of course, keep talking to your peers so that you get updated about the different rules or different updates that you have received from your lead or whatever. That's how you get to learn, and try to diverge into more fields than the one you're interested in. Because my first job, or I would say my first sports project, was as a content writer. And back then, I had no knack for writing at all. I was so scared to do it. And
Mm.
it was a startup of my friends, because I've been a tennis fan for about 19 years now. And back then it was, I think it was 9, 10 years back then. My
Wow.
friends actually told me, see, you have a very good knowledge of tennis, and we are starting a website which is a startup. We do not have any other person in our mind who can actually write tennis like you would because you know it. So please start. And I said, I have never written anything. And they said, just start writing. So when I started writing, I think I did 180 articles with them. And
Oh,
from
wow.
one article, first article to the article number 100, I could see my vocabulary had changed, my knowledge of the sport has changed. I knew more analytical things. I knew how to, magnify a score and statistic to see how the match went. And honestly speaking, there were times I did not even watch the match and I wrote about it.
Oh,
Yeah, and it never went wrong, thankfully.
oh.
So that's how I started. That was my first thing, and then I got into operations. Then I got into player management. Then I became an anti-doping chaperone as well, and so on. And now I've just stopped on journalism because that is something I feel I can do the best. Because my first job told me I'm not good at it, but now I feel like I'm the best at that only. So I should
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see your journey with everything from like starting with the grassroots and then now writing articles, and 180 is a lot. So, yeah, it's really a lot. And you just talked about content creation as well and analyzing, which is also connected to my next question, that you don't just run events, you also analyze tennis and create content about it. So, how does having the deep analytical understanding of the sport itself make you better at the business of running its events?
Right. So I would just start by saying that the event business or the sports event business is just like any other business. So, there are five pillars in business. It's called planning, organizing, staffing, directing, and controlling.
Mhm.
Right. So, when you plan an event, that is when you are planning the the main logistics of it, that we would be getting this amount of sponsorship from the title sponsor or from the organization which is the institutional head and so on, right? That is how you plan, and then you have to organize as in which city we want to go to, what is the age group we want, and then you get staffing means getting people. So it is very similar to everyday business. And once you see that they are specific on a sport, you start to see that business from the eye of that specific sport. For example, I would take for tennis because I have worked the most in tennis and most
Yeah.
interested in. So if I am planning a tennis tournament, the first thing I would see is that I want to get a place that doesn't have a lot of rainfall,
Yeah.
because the moment it starts raining, we have to stop the game.
Yeah.
And
Stop.
I, of course, nobody wants any such kind of hindrances,
Mhm.
unfortunately. So that's how my planning would go. My organizing would be that I want to see that people who are players who are 10 years old to 15 years old are, usurping in the game. So I would choose that kind of age group to go to.
Mhm.
Then staffing would be that I want to consider the people who know the game, so that if there is any shortcoming in between the game, I do not have to tell them that this is the rule. They
Yeah.
already should know it, so that we can, save even a few seconds of it. Because when the game is in play, when the ball is in the air or hitting the racket, or let's say there's a changeover when players sit between 2 points, every second is counting when it's a live game. So you
Yeah.
have to be very considerate about it. And if you have interest in the game, even if a bit, that always helps. So that's how it goes about. And if you know the rules and so on, that's how you can analyze each and every function very nicely. So
Yeah.
this happened with me because I was doing this tournament called Mumbai Open. I've done that twice. And back in that day, back in that time, a few of my friends who are fellow tennis fans, they were quite critical about this player getting a doping ban. Her name is Maria Sharapova. She had mistakenly doped. That's what she says. I mean, I'm not accusing her, but that's what
No.
she actually
Yeah.
gave before the
Like.
statement.
Mhm.
So people said that she takes a long break between 2 points in a match. She takes a toilet break. Maybe she's consuming something there and coming back. I mean, it was horrendous. People had so many viewpoints about it, and I thought it's all crap. Because when I went to do the event, that was women's event. Of course, there were no male players allowed over there. It was only a women's event, And whenever a player had to take a toilet break, let's say to change or to, let's say, ease themselves or whatever, there
Yeah.
was a person who had to be the line judge. They had to follow them to the toilet.
Oh
They
yeah.
have no privacy there. Even when you are using the toilet, you do not have any privacy because it has to be witnessed that are you consuming something
Oh
or are
yeah.
you
The
just changing your
doping.
dress.
Yeah.
I mean, when I got to know it, my entire perspective changed from a fan to a writer to an analyst that this is the reality. You cannot easily say that somebody is doping in between the matches because it cannot be done in plain sight and kept, under the sheets. No. So
Mm.
that's how my entire, the POV changed,
Change.
that this is how analytics works. This is how the operations work. And then I started actually, comprehending that if I have to write about this, this is how it start. So
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of the my brain structure changing from just a fan to somebody who actually looks at a holistic approach, because I over there I saw there so many people who are in the top 100 of the world, but it's so hard to reach over there.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
hard. You need a lot of hard work, be it a tennis player or a swimmer or a football player or anyone, a team game or an individual sport. It takes a lot of hard work to be 100 top 100 in the world.
Yeah.
And people can easily say, oh my God, Virat Kohli missed a shot. Dude, he did not miss a shot. There's lots of stuff that he did not miss. You did not appreciate about. And there's so much to see beyond one shot. There's so much to do.
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
earlier in the day, when I used to watch the matches on the TV, a lot of my friends used to sit with me and used to say, why did the player miss the shot? And I would say, how would I know?
Yeah.
It's in their head. And of course, they have calculated everything. You
Yeah.
cannot always know what is going on in the player's head. Even their coaches don't know. It's always a storm running. They
And
might
people
appear very
can
calm.
make mistakes and they only look
Of
at the wrong
course.
part. So,
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, if a player would not have an error, they would be a machine. And machines do
Yeah.
not win titles, very honestly.
Yeah.
Humans do.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I like the way you explained the five pillars of business as well. So that's really nice. And I think it's kind of crazy about the story that you just said about the woman going in the toilet and then people thinking it was doping.
Yeah.
I just think that's a
Exactly.
little, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was such an eye opener for me. I never believed that, the player has doped or whatever. But the ideas people, uh, create or they have rumors to spread
Yeah.
just because they think it's the case. They kind of, force their own opinions on you so that you believe it that this is the case. But it is not the case, not at all. I mean,
Yeah.
not at all. It's so, they take so much hard work to reach that point
Yeah.
that one cannot even think about.
And then it's harder to stay in that top 100.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
achieving that rank is one thing, but staying over there is another thing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. And for the last question, I wanted to ask you if you could go back and give your younger self one piece of career advice, what would it be?
Uh, one, my younger self. Right. So I think I was when I was a teenager, I was not very confident over my abilities.
Mhm.
It took me a very long while to, actually take off my glasses of doubt and actually see what am I capable of. I
Yeah.
needed a lot of push. So that's what I would have told my younger self, that just push yourself, be more confident. Don't wait for somebody to come and push you. Just push your own self.
Mhm.
Because lucky are those who get this push from others, but there are a lot of people who do not get a push and their talent goes unnoticed, which
Yeah.
should not happen to anyone, of course, because everybody has some talent, some unique talent. It should be out there to, show their prowess to. And that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think confidence is definitely one of the main things. So I
Yeah.
definitely agree with you. And that was the last question. So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing such real and practical insights. This conversation showed us that sport is not just about the action on the field, but it is also about the people, the planning, the coordination, and execution that bring every event to where it is and how we
Yeah.
see it. And for
Yeah.
everyone listening, I hope this episode helped you understand that there are many exciting careers in sports through operations, event management, logistics, media, and grassroots development. So, thank you for tuning in to Beyond the Track Sports Business Unfiltered. And thank you so much, Siring, for joining us today in this episode.
Thank you so much, Anna. I enjoyed myself here.
Yeah, thank you. See you in the next episode.